Am I audible clearly?
Yes,
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 ma'am.
you are audible. Yes, yes,
I'm
yes.
audible. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me know when we begin. Nice
Yes,
meeting you.
sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you for the
same here, same
invitation.
here. So I shall now officially actually introduce you. And I hope everybody has joined. A very good afternoon to everyone today. Ipsita, let me just tell you that today to talk, I have already spoken to you about it. Our department is Development Communication and Extension, and you are going to interact with the students of MSc Final who are pursuing Development Communication and Extension. And it's a subject called video production, which they are part of it. And which myself, I'm going to be welcoming you along with my senior colleague, Dr. Sarita Anand, who is actually with us in the same class today. And she is actually going to be with us and she teaches with me the same subject. So we, the students, and along with my senior colleague, Dr. Anand, we welcome you. And girls, I would like to introduce you to Ipsita. And Ipsita is she's a head of the film studies department, St. Xavier's, Kolkata. Wherever I'm wrong, Ipsita, do please correct me.
Sure,
And
sure.
she has
No
vast
problem.
experience in the academic field, and she's been teaching in the St. Xavier College for the past 11 years. She's an alumna of AJK Mass Communication Research Center, Jamia Millia Islamia. Apart from her own academic field, she is a very well-known voice person and who has actually researched a lot on the cinema and the concept of visuals and narratives. And with that kind of a background, we would love to hear and gain more knowledge from you, Ipsita. And we will be very much enlightened after hearing what you would like to tell and share with all of us today. Ipsita, to you.
Thank you, Professor Shweta. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to interact with your students. I hope I'm clearly audible because I'm not using a headphone. I cannot hear you. Just a second.
You are audible. You are.
Okay, I'm audible. Great. So, do we begin?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So before I begin, just a little inquiry that all my students here, I refer you as my students because you're my students for the next 1.5 hours. So how, have you had any sort of film studies background or it was a subject in any of in your course? So I just want to know that whether you have any introduction to film studies beforehand or is it the first time you're being introduced to the same? So any one of you.
Anyone can speak.
Yeah, I would like the session to be interactive, all of you, because otherwise it will become really boring if I just keep speaking. So let's make this session as interactive as possible. Yes,
Ma'am,
I
we
think someone
already
is speaking.
learned this subject in our graduation.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
not clearly audible. If you can repeat that.
We already learned that subject in our graduation.
Oh, you had film studies in your graduation. Wow, great. So is that true for everyone or is it true for only specific people? The others can respond in the chat box as well.
Ma'am, we are coming from different colleges from honors and other subjects, so not it's not same for every one of us. But
Okay.
we all of us have once or other time have had an opportunity to work on videos and short films. If not that, a small ad per se on the
Okay.
storyboards.
Okay, great, great. So I would begin with in the chat box, right? All of you just write the name of your favorite film, right? So that we kind of refer to these films when we are talking about cinema in general. So your favorite film in the chat box. Yes, I'll wait till the names kind of pour in. Thappar, okay, great. The sky is pink, okay. Yeah, all of you need to think and quickly put down a name. Okay, Masan, that's a lovely film. Pink. You can put films across genres and across genres in the sense across categories if you're aware of what do I mean by genre and across countries. So Hollywood, any other country, whichever film. Recent favorite, okay, great. Medha, Shawshank Redemption, very good. Others, there are 23 people, so I need at least 23 names, 20 names. Chalo. Tappad Razi, okay. Life is Beautiful. Yeah, that's one of my favorite film. Others who haven't seen the film, please watch it. It's definitely a recommendation from my side. Okay. Rang de Basanti, okay, very good. What else is there? Names, yes. Okay, great. So we all kind of like watching films, right? More or less. Okay. So I have prepared a PPT for you. Let me just but then saying that, it's also true that I won't be speaking too much from the PPT. Okay, so I'll provide this PPT to you. No need to take notes or anything. But what I would rather request you to listen to me actively. If you have any questions, please put it across in the chat box. Or since it's a 24 people gathering, feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me at any time and make the class as interactive as possible. Okay, so we as teachers also are it's a new medium for us. Also, one of you at least at any point of time, if I'm not audible or I'm not visible, any of it, please write it in the chat box. Or maybe you can just unmute yourself and tell me that, right? Or if I'm presenting something and instead you're seeing my face instead of the presentation, just let me know as and when. Okay, is that clear? Give me a heads up. Heads up means you write yes or no in the chat box. That's a heads up. Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you, Aditi. Great. Okay. Somebody needs to tell me. One person at least keep your audio unmuted and give me a audio feedback also as I ask for it. Okay, because the chat box will not be open in front of me when I'm. Okay, can you see my slides,
Yes,
everybody? Okay, great. So the name I thought of today's session is reading images, particularly because what we are learning and trying to do right now is obviously to get an insight on this new subject for you, which is film studies. But apart from that, also to get an insight of this whole world of cinema. How why should it be called an art form? Right, one very pertinent question. It's called the seventh art, by the way. So why it should be called an art? So we'll try and figure out and answer that question. And once we have figured out that question, how to read that piece of art. So we often call that we read painting, right? So you go to exhibitions, painting exhibitions, or you go to photographic exhibitions. Similarly, when you're watching a film, right, which is very different from a painting or which is very different from a photograph. Why? Because there's movement involved in it. So in that case also, then how to read this piece of art or how to interpret this particular piece of art, that is what we are going to figure out today. Okay. uh, yes. So that's me, a little introduction to myself. I've done my PhD in film studies from Jadavpur University. And before that, why I'm also interested, before that also, I was actively a part of filmmaking process because I was working in the Calcutta television industry and Bombay television industry for a little while. Okay, so the topics today cover a gamut of things, and we begin with something called origin of cinema. So to begin with, how many of you did have a flip book? I know the question is completely irrelevant, but I need that answer. So one or two of you can unmute yourself and talk to me. Flip book. Any idea what's a flip book?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So what does it do?
Ma'am, there is ma'am. Flip book is a type of book in which one side there is visual and the other side there is a description of that visual.
No, no, absolutely. Garima, flipbook means those books which had images, and when we used to flip those images, it used to appear to our eyes that everything is in motion. Anybody else had a flip book? It was very common during our childhood, my childhood. I don't know about
It's
you.
a flipbook is a
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
series
Lakshmi.
of pictures. Flipbook is a series of pictures which shows a story or it will give a information. मतलब एक sequence provide करती है.
Acha. Okay. Varda was also saying something. Yes, Varda.
Yes, ma'am. In the first year, we made a flip book.
Ah, wonderful. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that flip book on?
Ma'am, I made a flip book on DigiLocker, how to use.
Okay, how to use DigiLock. Wonderful. So,
Yes.
just to give you people who don't have an idea, a flipbook usually contains a lot of images, individual images, and you ask just to flip the book. You know, just like this is a, say, suppose this is, if this had every page had a different image, we were supposed to flip the book like this. I hope I'm visible, and and automatically it would appear to you as if things are in motion. Okay. Now, why am I talking about this flip book? Is because what is cinema? Cinema is basically an illusion of the eye. You know, when things in the sense when any recording device is actually capturing right images, it is not capturing as movements. It's not possible to capture as movements. What it's actually capturing is a series of images, right? A series of still images, which you call as frames in cinema. Which you call as frames. So then what happens is suppose when you're shooting it with your cell phone or you're shooting it with a camera, all it's doing is that it's kind of shooting a number of still frames, and then while it's being while you are seeing it, right, it's actually working in the same principle as a in the same principle as a yeah, as a flip book, right? And what a playback device is doing is that playing back a number of frames together, right? So in for us it's 24 or 25 frames per together. That's what it's called frame rate, right? So 25 frames it's playing in front of us, and then it's appearing to our eyes that everything is in motion. Now, to understand this concept which I just spoke about, how many of you remember the concept of this particular concept with relation to science? Any one of you? It's called persistence of, yes, Medha. Medha, your audio. Yes. Anybody has any idea about persistence of vision? Okay, so the persistence of vision is actually a concept of science, and you can Google it along with listening to me. So what happens is that the rule tells us that in order to perceive an image as a still image, as a single image, the image needs to remain in front of our eyes for 1/10 of a second. So only if this particular image is there in front of our eyes for 1/10 of a second, I'm going to perceive it as a still image. Okay. Now, what cinema does, what a recording equipment does, is that it is recording a number of still frames and then playing back in such a way that each individual image does not remain in front of our eyes for 1/10 of a second. Because if it is 24 frames, right? So if it's recording 24 frames per second and it's playing back 24 frames per second, each individual image is there in front of our eyes for how many seconds? Tell me. Put it in the chat box also. If your camera is recording 24 or 25 frames, right, then and it's playing back all one after the another and in 1 second, then each individual image is in front of our eyes for how many seconds? Do the calculation, little maths. Anyone?
3 to 4 seconds.
Yeah, so each will then stay in front of our eyes for how many seconds, Neha?
3 like
4 seconds कैसे होगा? Now I'll tell you, I'll repeat that for you. 25 frames per second, right? So each for how many? 1 by 25. Mega, you have to mute your audio. Yes, Mega.
Ma'am, it'll be 0.6
Yeah,
seconds.
zero point
exactly. Or
0.3.
you can say that 1 by 24
1 by
seconds or
20.
1 by
One.
Yeah, before.
Yes.
absolutely. Now, my next question is, thank you. Now, my next question is, which one is greater? 1 by 10 is greater or 1 by 25 is greater?
Ma'am, 1 by 10.
1 by 10. 1 by 10.
1 by 10 is greater,
Greater.
right? So that's what I am talking about, right? So in the sense, what happens is, in the sense, what happens is that when there is 1 by 25, so each individual image is not remaining in front of our eyes for 1/10 of a second. Okay, and as a result, we are unable to perceive these images as a single image. Is this concept clear to you? This is called persistence of vision. Is the concept clear?
Yes, ma'am, I want to add on something to it.
Yeah, sure,
There was
Tulika.
this toy called Zoe Trop, which we have seen in movies also.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely, you're correct. Zoetrope was actually something very similar to a flip book. So what Zoetrope did is that it recorded several images, and then while playing back, right, it ensured that it's more than, each individual image does not remain for more than 1/10 of a second. As a result, we could perceive everything in motion. Is that clear, Tulika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Anybody, any other question? Or if you're unable to understand the concept, please tell me again and I'll explain again. Anybody else? Or is this clear? Is the concept of persistence of vision clear to everybody? So this was actually the origin of cinema, right? And this entire scientific concept, which I just tried explaining to you, it first came into mind of this person called Edward Muybridge. Am my PPT visible?
Your voice is cracking, Ipsita.
Oh, okay. Yeah, someone's audio is on. Is this better now? Or I'll just take a headphone. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, this sounds better.
Okay. 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 So, where was I? Yes. Is the PPT visible?
Yes, it is visible. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So this entire phenomenon was then ideated. The first time this entire concept came into the head of this one person, and his name was Edward Muybridge. Okay, Edward Muybridge, and he's remembered because actually what happened was Muybridge had a bet with this another friend of his, and I'm not going to the details of anything. You can just Google the name, and this famous horse experiment is there. So what happened? He wanted to figure out. This friend of Muybridge wanted to figure out that whether when the horse is galloping, then all four legs of the horses touches the ground at one time or not. Okay, so this is what he wanted to figure out, right? And then Muybridge thought that the only way to figure this out is that he actually installed several cameras, like 24 cameras he installed, and he tried shooting, okay, together. And then what happened is while playing back, all he did was he put all these images one after the another, like just like a Zoetrope would do, or just like a flip book would do, right? Play images one after the another. And he did the same thing and tried figuring it out. whether the all the four legs of the horse kind of touch the ground at the same time or not, right? So the answer is actually irrelevant. But this actually led to the birth of cinema, right? Because what we, for the first time we were seeing in front of our eyes was something which is called cinema. Because now instead of still frames, right, just like in photography all we have is still frames, so now instead of still frames we had something moving in front of our eyes. Is this concept clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So this he was basically the Edward Muybridge, and I hope my screen was visible. And his famous example of what of time lapse photography. So in fact, in a way, you can say that time lapse photography was actually the origin of cinema, and Edward Muybridge horse experiment was actually the origin of cinema, right? And from there on, obviously, a series of inventions went on and happened in the field of cinema. So the history is not very important, in the sense it's obviously important, but there are various sources of knowing the history thanks to Google. I'll send you links and material where you can read about the history of cinema. So I'm not going into too much of the history part, and I'm just going to introduce you to a few names. So, for example, post Muybridge, another important name which you should remember is Thomas Edison, right? Who invented the famous kinetoscope. What is a kinetoscope? Simply, it's a a viewing equipment. Kinetograph was a recording equipment, and kinetoscope was simply to view. So somebody had to look at this instrument called kinetoscope, and all kinetoscope did was play a number of still images at a rate which was at a higher speed, one after the another. And again, when all of these were put together by this particular machine called kinetoscope, the person who is peeping through the machine, it appeared that people were dancing or the horse was moving. So basically, moving images were there in front of our of your eye. So post kinetoscope, the another invention, which important invention which happened was called cinematograph, right? Which is invented by the famous Lumiere brothers. Right? If you've heard about Lumiere brothers, they are known as the father of cinema, so to say. Right? So it's very difficult. And if you ask me then, ma'am, who are the origins of filmmakers, or is it correct to say Lumiere brothers as father of filmmakers? So I have a little philosophical note here to add on to that. It's actually very wrong to say that this one person is responsible for the invention of cinema, right? Because this question is itself a very delicate question as to who invented cinema. It's like asking who invented English. Can we say who invented English? Is there any answer to it? That who invented English? Yes, if I ask you who invented English, will you be able to answer that to me? Or if
No.
I ask that who invented the language called Hindi, right? Is there any answer to that as well? No, actually, there is no answer to that, right? We don't know who invented English. We don't know who invented the language called English or the language called Hindi. And it's absolutely wrong to attribute the invention to any one person. Similarly, even though many of the history books, so to say, and definitely Wikipedia, definitely should never follow, never use for learning. So we'll actually attribute the invention of cinema, so to say, to Edison, to Lumiere brothers. But saying that, I will request that it's absolutely wrong to say these people invented cinema, because what is cinema? Cinema is a language, right? And the moment I say cinema is a language and we are reading images, cinema is an art form, then how can you say that a one particular person invented an art form? And there's a particular scholar. I haven't included him in the PPT because there's a lot to speak about him. But you can definitely take note of his name. He's called Andre Baza. right? And he spoke a lot about this idea of invention of cinema, and who invented cinema, or rather the idea which I find very interesting in his writing is that what came before. Because in cinema, what happens is technology becomes a very, very important part, right? Because you need a medium. There is a camera, and we cannot forget the presence of a camera. Um, unlike other forms of art where it's the hand, so when you sculpt, you use your hand, right? And you have the object. And then when you paint, it's similar. But cinema, now you have a intervention of a camera. Okay. So in this sense, that he asks a question in one of his essays, that what came before, whether the technology came before, which played an important role in the language of cinema, or how the language of cinema developed, which cannot be negated. We when we say that the technology of sound came first, and then so the film suddenly became audible, right? Or the technology of color filming came first, and hence suddenly we had color film. So whether the technology came before, or it was the other way around. So some people decided that, oh, now we should have films in color, and therefore some scientist or some inventor kind of found out a means to do that. Or somebody said, no, but then in films people should be talking, and then some person kind of figured out how to do the same. So this question always remains with cinema, that the technology came first or the language came first, right? On that note, we'll kind of again move on with Lumiere brothers, who for the first time were making cinema. Okay, so why am I saying making cinema? Because before Lumiere brothers, the work which was done by Muybridge and a few others were basically time lapse photography, right? So they were doing time lapse photography, and then they were joining these pictures together and showing it to audience and saying it as cinema. What Lumiere Brothers did was, and I'm playing a small film from Lumiere Brothers. This is called Arrival of the Train, right? And this film is particularly famous because when people saw this film for the first time, they kind of ran away from theaters because they could not imagine that there was this moving train in front of their eyes. They almost felt that the train is going to come out of the screen and it's going to hit them, right? And then they left the entire they left the theater. This was the power of moving images. It was a very, very powerful medium, and Lumiere brothers kind of were definitely the first to understand the power of this moving images, and hence they made films which did not have full-scape narrative. I am not saying that Lumiere's films had full-scape narrative, but neither they were simply time-lapse photography, right? So they had characters, right? So for example, in this film, the train itself is a character. And the entire series in YouTube. Please have a look. You just have to type Lumiere Brothers, and kind of these films are there. These films are often called Lumiere actualities, right? Why actualities? Because they were shooting real things. This was not fiction. This was a real train. Or the other films, and other very famous film is Workers Coming Out of the Factory, which is simply a group of workers who are coming out of a factory setting, right? And they were real workers. It was a real factory. So they were shooting real people. They were shooting real life. These films were not very long. Everything was shot at eye level. What do I mean by eye level? The camera is there in front of the eyes, and obviously everything was silent, right? And hence, Lumiere films were famously known as the Lumiere actualities. Any doubt till now, or anyone who wants to add on something? At least one person needs to speak. Only then I move forward. Anyone?
Anyone wants to ask something?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, anyone who has, you can write in the chat box as well. Anybody who has seen any of the films in YouTube? If you have an interest in the history, might be some of you, or one of you at least, have seen the films. Not if not yet, please go ahead and watch. It's very interesting. There are very interesting documentaries on Lumiere brothers also. Now the next name I'm going to introduce, I'm sure that you have heard of him, right? And I need some answers in the chat box this time. And let me show you. Yeah, I hope my presentation is visible. How many of you have heard of this man, George Méliès, and his famous film Trip to the Moon? Hmm. So no one saw the film, the Oscar-winning film Hugo? Anyone
Oh,
who? Yes. Yes. Anyone who has seen the film? I'm typing the name in the chat box. Very good. Yes. So if you can elaborate on what the film was about. Yes. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So if you haven't seen, please. Yes.
Luna, would you like to say?
Okay, you Professor, you've seen Hugo too. Okay. So I'm sure you all liked. Somebody saying something. Yes. Okay, fine. Please type it in the chat box. I'll read it out for you, whatever you've written. Um, so if you've seen Hugo, and people who haven't seen, please do watch the film. It's a fantastic film. And it's about this one filmmaker, one of the pioneers called George Méliès, right? So what George Méliès did was, till now, Lumiere brothers were making films, but they were making films which were, real actualities, in the sense that they were shooting real people, and they were not, the films were really short, and all eye level shots, and each film was basically one piece of action. So if you're unaware of what is short scene and all of that, it was just, you can know that it's one piece of action. Whereas what Méliès was doing is that in his film called Trip to the Moon, and again it's there in YouTube for you to watch, he was joining individual piece of actions together and trying to create a piece of narrative which was fictional, right? So he had actually said, he had a set, there were actors, and this was a very, very big difference from what Lumiere brothers were doing, who were shooting real life, and Méliès were shooting actors. It had a set, and the set was created, and most importantly, it was not just one piece of action. So Lumiere brothers were lights, camera, action, start and cut. And what Méliès did was lights, camera, action, one shot, next again lights, camera, action, next shot. There are 10 shots like this, or whatever the number is, and you join them together, right? So he was actually creating a language for cinema, and that's why I have written it as the language of cinema. And followed by him was obviously Edwin S. Porter. Why am I referring to these names? Is that if you study history of cinema, even if you write a paper on your own, you should be aware of these names. So Edwin S. Porter again made certain changes, right? So for example, he so already the concept of shot, the concept of joining individual pieces of action was introduced by Méliès. So what Porter rather did was now also cutting into action, right? So these are kind of developments. Each person came and contributed something to the language of cinema. And obviously one name which is very important in context of language of cinema is D.W. Griffith. And this is just one film. The reason I've written about this film is it was a very famous film called The Birth of a Nation, right? So I'm going to play a little bit from The Birth of the Nation. Why Birth of the Nation is very important is because why D.W. Griffith is actually very important, because he is known. It's again, he's known as the father of the language of cinema, and the reason being that he, for the first time, was number one, making a full length feature film, but his films were very different. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end, something very similar to modern day films. Today our films will have a beginning, will have a middle, will have an end. So in the beginning of the film, the characters will be introduced. All wrote about the favorite film. If you have a look at those films, you will see that there's a beginning of the film where the characters are introduced, then there'll be conflict in the film, then there'll be a problem in the film, and then somebody will solve that problem in the course of the film. This is what all films are about. And Birth of a Nation is sorry, and D.W. Griffith's films were very, very similar. So the language was now fully formatted by the time Griffith came into being. So it started with Lumiere brothers, who made something very rudimentary, whose films were all one shot, were one piece of action, followed by Méliès, who then joined these individual pieces of action and made a fictional narrative, followed by Porter, who introduced things like cutting into action and a few other things, and then followed by D.W. Griffith, who now, his films had a close up and long shots. So he introduced kind of these things. Then he introduced that the film, a feature length film, will be divided into beginning, middle, and end. So all of these language was now incorporated finally by D.W. Griffith. Okay, just watch 1 minute of the film and there'll be no audio. There is audio, but obviously this audio is added later. These are silent films. Is it visible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to play it and we just watch it for 1 minute. It's 1915. So by the time 1915, the language of cinema was fully developed. Okay, that is what, and that's why it's called. It's rather a very, very new piece of art. It's not very long back. Right, so it's rather a new form of art, and we'll speak about how quickly it picked it up also. But before that, yes. Okay, so yes, yes, absolutely, Shruti. There was the the particular film is actually also known for all the wrong reasons, primarily because it was very much a racist film. I'll just change the headphone settings. Just one sec. Yes, Shruti, if you're aware of it, tell us.
Yes, I remember watching it a long time ago, like around 5, 6 years back, and it's
Mhm.
actually adapted from a book called Clansman or
Clansman.
something similar. Yeah, and it in a very negative light portrays African Americans as dangerous, lazy, and like in all the negative way possible.
Hmm.
And there were literal riots, and the film was banned in several cities. But I think another great work of Griffith is Intolerance or Intolerant, something like that, which is
Intolerance.
also,
Yes.
yeah, I
Hmm.
think.
So you're absolutely correct in the sense that this was particularly remembered this film because it kind of showed it was a racist film in general, and it showed African Americans in very poor light. But if we if we do not discuss all of that and we discuss particularly about the technique, so did you notice that number one there was different camera angles in the film? There was a side angle. So earlier, all the films, I just showed you Lumiere Brothers at least. The entire film was made from a frontal angle, which means that the camera was right in front of the eyes. Was it the same in this scenario? Okay, Samri, Medha, yes, unmute yourself. Okay, so yes, it was not the same in this scenario. So if you've noticed the watch the clip carefully, you will see that that number. Am I audible? Am I not audible?
Yes,
You're
ma'am. You.
audible.
Okay, great, Shruti. Yes, thank you. So, number one, that it was, there were different camera angles were used, which was again something which Griffith came up with, that you not necessarily use one camera angle, which is right in front of your eyes, because up till then, up till Porter, so Lumiere, Méliès, and Porter, in all three, if you watch their films, the camera was right in front of your eyes, but Griffith used something different. Secondarily, he also changed the shot sizes, right? So if you see that not all the shots were long shot, they were long shot. Long shot, what is a long shot? Where you see everything in the frame, right? And close up means where you only see a portion of the frame. Okay, so he kind of varied the camera angle is what where the angle is where the camera is placed. So what Griffith did was he said that now is the time we can change. So camera does not need to remain in one position. The size of the frame does not need to remain always same. So these are the two major changes he introduced. Then obviously he introduced the idea that the idea of a feature film where which I was already told a couple of times, the full scale films which now is going to be divided into beginning, middle, and end, which is going to be have characters, and these characters are going to be introduced in the beginning of the film, and then we are going to actually see the stories of these characters. Griffith also made very smaller films also. So many of his films were actually very similar to Porter also. But a film like Birth of a Nation or a film like Intolerance, these are full scale films which are made by these filmmakers. And therefore, the name of D.W. Griffith had been etched in the history of cinema. Is this clear? Is this clear? Give me a heads up. Yes or no? Yes, thank you. Okay. Yes. Okay, great. Sometimes, yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, this is what I need. Next, we go on topic actually. So till now we were talking about the origin. Okay. Now what happened? Cinema already now took birth and already finished its embryonic stage. So the gestation period is over. And now suddenly there were a lot of filmmakers who were making cinema. And when I say a lot of filmmakers making cinema, I'm covering a long span of time, right? So I'm covering actually post 1919 to say about 2000. Post 2000 again, in the new millennium, several changes have occurred, and the primary being the digitization of cinema. So that will need another lecture actually to talk about that how the language has been changing, and definitely the language has been changing, evolving with this new technology. So that comes in that has more or less definitely impacted cinema, the language of cinema, the medium, the art form in a big way post that is post the arrival of the digitization of cinema. But before that, if we talk about, and for a long period of time, and if you talk about this language from 1990s to say about the end of the decade, right? We can see that in terms of language, there are two clans of filmmakers who have emerged, right? And these two clans of filmmakers are very much similar to also the clans of artists you can find in any other piece of art, right? So if you talk about painting, right, and if I talk about painting as a piece of art, I will say that there are two basic kinds of painters for a long period of time. There are one set of painters who are realist painters, and there's another set of painters who are called formalist painters. Okay, anybody has any idea about the difference between realism and formalism and would like to speak about it? Anybody who has done any painting or sculpting will definitely be aware of these. Or English, if you've studied during your graduation, then I'm sure you've heard about, even there are realist writers. So you've heard about these two concepts of realism and formalism. Anyone? No. Okay, Lakshmi. Yes.
Ma'am, I
Yes,
like
Shruti.
have a very basic understanding. So realism
Okay.
is something which we usually see in documentary filmmaking, wherein we
Okay.
are trying to depict the real life as closely as
Hmm.
possible. So the angles and everything would resemble like we see it in our everyday eyes
Hmm.
through our everyday things. But in the other, we usually use an element of suspense. So there's a lot of dramatization into it.
Absolutely. You're absolutely talking on on the same page. Anybody else who would like to elaborate on any idea on realism and formalism in cinema? I mean, in general, not in cinema. Okay, so if I particularly talk about cinema, and this actually stands true for any piece of art, there's one group of people or one group of filmmakers whose entire idea is to recreate the real world, recreate the real world, right? And this can happen in painting also. So you recreate the real world, right? And this can happen in sculpting also. This can happen in cinema also, right? So we particularly talk about cinema, and we can see that from 1920s onwards, and definitely 1940 was a major period of time when there are groups of filmmakers, right, who started the realist film movement. And I call it movement because these group of filmmakers were hell bent that the ideal kind of cinema should be the cinema which recreates the real. And we are particularly talking about one group of filmmakers who were born, in the sense, who emerged in the Italy, right, in the post-war Italy, who kind of thought that that they should make one particular kind of film. And what is that kind of film? Which simply recreates the real world, right? And for doing that, what they did was they used certain elements in cinema, in the sense that what they did was, number one, they said that the takes, you understand take, each shot, right? So each piece of action. So what is one shot? Camera, lights, action, camera, till the point you do cut, right? So this is called one shot, and obviously cinema is comprised of several of these shots. So what these filmmakers did was they had lengthier shots. Okay, they ensured that their individual shots were lengthy, right? This was one of the ways in which they incorporated the real, right? Somebody said documentary. You're absolutely correct. documentary also gives us a perception of the real, okay, or mimic the real world. So when I say realist films, and when I'm particularly talking about fiction films, and I'm not talking about documentary films, there also a group of filmmakers tried to make certain kind of films which mimicked the real, and therefore known as the realist camp, right? So these filmmakers belong to the realist camp. So what they did was three things I have noted down here. One was they had really long takes. Second is they had wide angle. What do you mean by wide angle? That they were not using any close up. There was not much cutting into action. Okay, everything was wide. And what is deep focus? That everything is in focus. So what happens when we shoot? What do? We focus onto something and we keep the rest out of focus. Why do you think we do that? Why do you
Ma'am,
think we do that? Yes,
ma'am, to emphasize on the thing that like we want to build up
absolutely.
a
Hmm. You want to build up?
we wish to build up a focus there for the audience to be, focused at
Absolutely.
one
Yes.
specific point.
So who wants that, Medha? Who wants to do that? Isn't there a filmmaker who's doing that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely. So this was one of the main idea of the realist camp, that the role of the filmmaker should be minimal. And they thought that the only way that the role of the filmmaker can be minimal is that when they have longer takes, when there is nothing of these blurring sort, in the sense there's nothing which is kept out of focus in the frame, and there is no cutting into action. Cutting into the action means there is no close up. Because they are saying that the moment there is an intervention of the camera person or the intervention of a director, then what you are seeing on frame is basically the perception of the filmmaker, which was something which was not the idea of the realist camp. I'll give you a more simpler example, right? There's a girl and a boy, and they're holding hands, right? And they're sitting in a park. Okay. Now, when you see the frame, right, it's a long shot. Long shot means the camera is really far away, okay, and they're capturing. Now, you as audience, when you see it, screen is not visible, PPT is not visible. Okay, I'll just put the PPT again. Now, is the PPT visible? Is the PPT visible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. Okay. So now, yeah, the example I was giving. So when it's in long shot, what will you immediately think that they are a couple? Can't they be brothers and sisters? They can be friends. They can be anything, right? When we are looking at it, we will not perceive it that they are immediately, at least, that they are lovers. We will think that they can be any sort of relationship. They can be simply friends, and then we are seeing them from a long perspective. Now, what if the director immediately cuts into the action and give you a close up of the hand, holding of hands? What will happen to you then, you as viewer? Won't you immediately say, oh, fine, so this is basically a couple? Are you getting what I'm trying to say? So, in the second scenario, when you are being shown a close up, or when suddenly everything is blurred and the hands are in focus, it is the filmmaker who is telling you now to think that, look, do not think otherwise. You as a viewer are supposed to think that these two people are a couple. So this means that there's an intervention of the filmmaker. But the moment you decide to take your camera backward, which means no close up, or the moment you decide not to blur anything and keep everything in the frame in complete focus, or the moment you really decide to keep the take very long, what you're doing is immediately you are making the intervention of the filmmaker minimal. Is this clear to you or not? Tell me. Only then I move forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is the realist camp. Okay, what is realism? Realism in cinema is simply to make minimal intervention of the filmmaker. Okay, I hope the example is clear. And some of the filmmakers, especially filmmakers like D. Sika and few others, right, to particularly belong to a particular camp of filmmaking called neo-realist filmmakers, right? These people ensured that when there's a film, they have minimal intervention of the filmmaker. I'm going to just show you one small footage of a film called Bicycle Thieves. It's by Di Sica. It's an Italian film. It's a post-war Italian film, and just a small piece, and you will understand more or less what I am talking about. Okay. I'll present it from the Chrome tab because now we'll hear audio. Is it visible, all of you?
Yes, it is visible.
Thank you. It's a small 3-minute sequence. Please watch it.
Al ladro! Al ladro! Che ti è successo? Monta, monta! Vai appresso, corri! Corri, dai! Corri! Ma perché tu, l'ho visto io! Corri! Che c'è? Beh, ne deve essere sbagliato, eppure ero proprio convinto che avesse preso d'altra parte. Vabbè, mo ricordi mai. Che io fa.
Now, here you see, I'm sorry for interrupting. Yeah, here you see, I'm sorry for interrupting, that what is in focus. Even though it's not clear, if you see it in big screen, the sky is clear, the buildings are clear, every object here is clear. So there is no cutting into action. And the reason Disika actually states this in his interview, and New Realist Camp kind of states this, that they didn't want no, they didn't want to decide it for the audience what they want to see on screen. They wanted the audience to decide for themselves what they wanted to see in the screen. Okay, and this is obviously a major benchmark of the realist camp. So therefore, if you've seen the action, the takes are really long. There is no cutting into action, and everything is in focus. If you haven't noticed this, please notice it from now on. Yes. Okay. So this was in the tunnel scene also. Absolutely, Juliet. Yes. So if you've seen all, if you've noticed here, the things which I mentioned during the presentation are more or less there in the film. So Bicycle Thieves is obviously the height of, the near-realist camp. And if you ask me, ma'am, give us some modern examples. Give us some examples right now of the neorealist camp, of the realist camp. Neorealist was a movement which happened in Italy, so not everything is neorealism. But say, for example, if you watch modern day Dardina Brothers, I don't know if you have anybody seen the films, fantastic films, please watch them. Dardina Brothers actually till date follow that kind of, it's a fiction film, they're not documentary, but they yet keep are very much a part of the realist camp. And there are many examples, others as well. And also, before I go on to the other camp, which is the imagist or the formalist camp of filmmakers, remember that it's not necessary that you need to be, you need to be realist means you have to follow each and every parameter of the realist filmmaking. You can have tendencies towards realism, okay? And maybe you can start thinking of any film you have seen which have rather the tendencies of the realist filmmakers. Now, if we talk about formalism, or if we talk about, to use a simpler word, let's use the word imagist. Imagists have rather faith on the image. Okay, what do I mean by having the faith on the image? This means that they want the image to speak, right? So the realist didn't want the images to speak. Here the formalist wanted the images to speak, so they don't mind that cutting into close. Remember the hand example I gave you? So a realist filmmaker will say, no, no, please do not give up a close up of the hand. Please don't blur everything and keep the hand in focus, and don't keep the take so long. Why? Because we don't want people to understand. We want people to realize for themselves that whether they are couple or not couple or whatever it is. But imagist camp will say, no, but then cut close, right? It's my film, it's the director's film. I want to establish that these people are a couple, and it's absolutely my right to do so, right? So film then becomes very much overpowered by the filmmaker when the filmmaker follows the realist camp, right? And I'm going to show you an example. And actually many films belong to the realist camp, or many films are a combination of imagist or realist. But there's one film which is extreme, and hence I'm showing you this. um, okay, and it's a film called Tashe Dish. It's a Bengali film. But since it's an extreme use of the imagist camp, I am kind of showing you this. Just one second, I'm playing it for you. I'm playing the trailer for you.
We are not able to see your screen, the
Uh,
shared screen. Yeah, now we
oh,
can.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, now it's visible. Thank you.
yeah. Okay, or I'm just showing you another example. Just one second. An old film now. If you have heard of German Expressionism, which means this group of filmmakers from Germany who made again very different kind of cinema. So they made something very contrasting and very different from neorealism. or a film like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or a film like Nosferatu. We'll give you a brief example. Are you still seeing the YouTube?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to randomly play a portion of the film, just to give you an idea of. So see, there's extreme use of makeup. Again, use of makeup is something which is not very realist. Yeah, so to make it more clear, you have to watch the entire film, but this was just to give you an idea. Yes. So the character is not looking real. He's absolutely Garima. So there's a lot of use of makeup in the film. There's a lot of use in the setting in the film. Whereas the earlier film I showed you, which was The Bicycle Thieves, the film by Disika, there even the characters were real character, right? So that person you saw, it's a film about a father and a son. The father, I mean, he's a working class person in the film, and in real life also, he's actually a. So it's Richie and Bruno. Richie is the father, and Bruno is the son. So Richie is a bricklayer in real life, right? So actually, real characters were used in the film. Now, the location in the film was absolutely real, right? So which means that none of there were not sets in the film. Real locations were used. So anybody, any filmmaker who will belong to the realist camp or who will have realist traits in the film will kind of ensure that a lot of untension will not be there. Okay, whereas somebody who will belong to the imagist camp feels that no, interventions are very important. And in cinema, the language of cinema is such that there are a lot of things which should actually speak, and speak what the director wants to say. So it's the director's film. The author becomes very, very important. Okay, I'll go back to the presentation. I hope you can see my presentation now. And therefore, we come to the question that what should you follow? What should me and you do, right? Whether we should make films which are realist films or whether we should make films which are imagist films. Why am I saying this question is that many of my students keep asking me this, that ma'am, you're talking about all this. So what when we make films, what we should do? The answer to this is actually I don't have that answer, and it's very wrong to say that a certain film, okay, brand a film as a realist film or brand a film as an imagist film, right? Rather, I will say that both of these tendencies are there in a particular film, or one particular film may be more inclined to a particular tendency. And when you read a piece of film, when you read any piece of any shot, right, either a film or one shot, then you will have to figure out for yourself what is there, right? Now, what it is more inclined to. Now, how the language of cinema is very different from poetry is basically because of, and some of the elements I've already spoken to you when I was speaking about the imagist camp, is because in cinema, uh, Okay, let me explain you like this, right? Um, in cinema, there is nothing in the screen which you cannot show. You should not have anything in the screen which you cannot show. So, for example, if I have a line, okay, Ipshita is thinking about her home. Okay, Ipsita is thinking about her home. I can simply write this down when I'm writing a short story. Okay, so that's fine. I'm writing a short story. But if I ask you that show it to me in the film, what will you do? You have to show on screen that Ipshita is thinking about her home. Anybody, one person, please answer. How will you show this? Can you write it down? If you can,
Ma'am,
write it down. Yes, yes, dear.
maybe it's just an imagination that I have right now. Maybe she's walking down a lane of residencies and then she just finds a very pretty house and she just stops by for a moment, take a pause and then move to portray that she's kind of thinking about her home.
But then that can be that I'm missing somebody who lives in that house also. How will you show that Ipshita is missing somebody, is missing her home?
Okay. Her home precisely
Anybody
as
else?
in home back home.
As in back home, yes.
Okay. So maybe you can show it by a lunchbox, maybe like she opens up a lunchbox, has a bite of food, and then she gets reminded of and gets a hit of
Okay,
nostalgia.
very good. Very good. Yes, very good. Okay. Very good, Medha. Interesting example. So I open a lunch box and then you're saying that I will see an image of my home, right? I think you were saying that. Okay, Shruti
Yes,
has
yes,
written.
ma'am.
Okay, good. We can have a short view followed by the memories of the house running through the corridors. Okay, not memories. You have to say that we are seeing these visuals. Okay, now every time, whether it be Medha or whether it be Vinod, both of you emphasized on one thing that we are seeing. Okay, because unlike a short story, you cannot simply keep anything to the audience imagination. Because यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? यहाँ पे you're simply writing that Ipshita misses her home. Okay, that's one line. And me as a reader, when I am reading it, I am imagining all of it in my head. Okay, but in cinema, you cannot do that simply, right? You can obviously have a voiceover and somebody say that now Ipshita is missing her home, but that's very, very cliche thing to do. Let me make the example more clear, okay, more simpler. You are in a railway station. Okay, can you say now Ipshita is in a railway station? That'll be so lame to have in a film. What do you need to do? You need to actually show a railway station. You need to place this Ipshita character in the railway station and then take the shot. If you simply some person have said now Ipshita, imagine that Ipshita is in a railway station, that will be very, very banal. Right? But you can do that where? You can do that in a radio play. Okay, you can do that. You can do it in a radio play in a different way. You can recreate it with the audio, which is the soundscape of the film, of the railway station. You don't need to actually place Ipshita in the railway station, but you can have her record Ipshita's voice separately. You can have all the sound effects in the railway station and you can merge them together. You can do that. Or separately, you can, when you're writing a book, you can simply write Ipshita, is in the railway station where she is eating coffee, right? But when it's a film, what is happening is you need to show everything. Okay, this might sound very simple to you, but actually this is the basic difference between the language of cinema and any other language, because here everything needs to be represented, everything needs to be told to the audience. Okay, uh, and when I say everything needs to be told, it's important to note that everything need not be told verbally. Because if you make everything tell everything verbally, then it'll rather become a radio play. Am I clear or not? Won't it become a radio play? Give me a heads up. Yes, no, what? Yes, it'll become radio play and it'll become very boring. Now, there are some films which are absolutely based on dialogues. Films like Before the Sunrise, Yeah, After the Sunrise. There's a lovely film by Kiarostami as well. So there are films which are completely based on dialogues, but then not all films. Not always you can make overuse of dialogues. Okay, and therefore there are a lot of elements in any cinema which a director actually uses in order to speak, in order to say, and that is where the language of cinema is different from other language, because the language of cinema incorporates just the language of cinema actually incorporates, please read this too, a lot of elements. Okay, and all of these elements are together used in order to say what the director has to say. What are these elements? There's this few I've mentioned. There are others as well. So there's setting, there's decor, there's lighting, there's depth of space, there's costume, there's music and editing. And what the term mise en scène, which is a French word, actually means all of it. So a filmmaker actually uses all the elements in the mise en scène to say what he or she has to say. When he overuses the same, he belongs to the imagist camp. When he makes minimum use of it, then he belongs to the realist camp. But nevertheless, it cannot be that you can make a film without using all these elements. Please read it. I don't want to repeat it for you. Just read the slide. Done? Can I move forward? Professor Shweta, how much time do I have?
You, I mean, another 10 minutes, then we can ask them to ask questions from you. Correct?
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. 15 minutes. Yeah, so we'll move on. So what I was saying is that a filmmaker needs to use all these elements in order to say what he has to say. Now, again, it's a very short clip, and I'm going to not play the audio because I'll talk along with it. Now, look at this scene, okay? Is it visible to all of you?
Yes,
Is it?
yes.
Yeah. Now look at the scene here. A small scene from the very famous Satyajit Ray's film Charulata. Okay, and here when you see that entire scene, you understand a lot of things. Okay, watch it. Like it's fine. You just take how much 1 2 minutes. Now the name of the character The name of this character is Charu, and if I ask you, write 5 things about Charu, can you immediately do that in the chat box? Quickly. I ask, you just saw a sequence which had this lady, and I'm telling you that the name of the lady was Charu, and I just ask you to write down 5 things about Charu, whatever you could decipher by seeing this particular scene. किसी को कुछ नहीं समझ में आया? ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता. Okay, anything. Chat box. Okay, I'll give you a cue. What is her economical background? Is she rich? Is she poor? Yes, Medha. She's wealthy. Okay, understood. Okay. If I ask you, is she very okay, rich? Very good, Aditi. Is she very active in the sense that is she bored or she's extremely happy? A young wealthy lady. Yes, answer my next question. Is she bored or is she, does she has a very good life? Okay, Shruti, very good, bored. Bhavna, immediately write it in the chat box. Why did you feel that she is bored? Everybody, in 2 lines, why did you feel that she's bored? Okay, next question. How was her relationship with her husband? Also, quickly answer, why did you feel that she was bored? She needs attention. Okay, very good, Neha. She's so slow. Okay, so she was not slow. The director made her slow. Okay. Anything else? Quickly. Quickly write down why she seems suspicious. Okay. She had doubt on her husband, not exactly doubt, but yes, there was a discord between the husband and wife. The husband seemed very busy from work. Very good, Shruti. Now, all of these things, actually, there was not a single piece of dialogue in the entire scene, and yet you could decipher that she belonged to a rich family. She was relatively very bored. At least in that afternoon, she was very bored. If you haven't seen the entire film, and then we could understand that she had a not so happy relationship with the husband. And how did you decipher all this, if I may be allowed to say? Number one, from the props in the house. Those are called props. Those are things which are placed in the house, which would not have been there had she been poor. Then from the pace, her pace in the film, and the pace of the camera, right? So each of the shots were very long, lengthy. It was not like one after the other, quick shots, right? Whereas if you see a film like Blade Runner, you will have very, very quick shots. So the pace of the shots was very slow. It was almost lagging. So that made you feel that she was bored, right? And then lastly, the husband doesn't speak to her. Obviously, then the husband is immersed in the book itself, and again the prop, which is the binoculars which she used. All of this actually makes you decipher a lot of things. Now, what I want to pinpoint here is what the director did was used a lot of elements of the mise en scène. So here we discuss the setting, we discuss the decor at least. We here you also understood from the costume and the makeup that she does not belong to a. Was the film set today in the contemporary times? No, the film was not set today, right? It was definitely set in 60s, right? Which was again very, very clear from the attire of this woman also, and from the clock. See, look at the clock. It's an old clock. So all of this. So costume and makeup, right? And the editing also, not editing, but at least the pace of the film. So all of these together made gave you certain impression about the character, gave you certain impression about. You could decipher a lot of things from this particular sequence without being used a single piece of dialogue. And this is what cinema is. Cinema uses all these elements to say what it has to say. And when I say it, in the sense, the director has to say. I'm going to use another piece, and this is another very, very famous film by Alfred Hitchcock. It's called Psycho. I hope the audio is audible. Let me know. Is the audio audible? Is it audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Not
Great, great.
yet. I mean, play. The video is hand. Yeah, now it's fine.
Now, once again, definitely I may be allowed to say here that if the audio would not have been there, this particular trip would not have created the impact which it did, right? Or there were actually 72 cuts in the film, right? This in the murder sequence, right? So if those number of many cuts were not there, then the impact would not have been created, right? And I especially showed you this sequence for the shot taking and the music, right? So again, elements of mise-en-scène. Music is an element of mise-en-scène. Camera angle is an element of mise-en-scène. Shot size is an element of mise-en-scène. The director actually makes a combination of all of these, right, in order to put forward. So to make this scary, if I may say so, right, he had to utilize a lot of things. The famous dissolve, or the curtains falling down, with the swirl of the water to the eye. So these are decisions which were taken by the filmmaker. So filmmaker wrote that okay, I'm going to use this, and this will say what I have to say, not some persons coming and saying it at the background that, oh, it's going to be a scary evening or a scary death, right? So somebody had to ensure that it was scary by using a number of elements, right? And this is what say is, by using all these elements, you kind of create that horror. If we can just see one more, or otherwise we can quickly now go on to the discussion part. But I think more or less the idea, maybe I can just, sorry, lighting, I'll just give you an example. You're sitting in a classroom, okay? And you're sitting in a classroom and it's normal tube light, okay? So what will you understand? You will understand it's a classroom where a teacher is taking a class. Now, what if suddenly I change the light into a red light, right, or a green or a blue light? Like, so there's incomplete blue light, and this teacher is teaching. Will the meaning remain same? Somebody tell me in the chat box. Will the meaning be same? Absolutely same. That the teacher is teaching in the classroom, or you as viewer will say, "Nahi, abhi to something is going to happen in this classroom, or this is going to be a surreal world, or something that suddenly the light changes into blue." Had this been just a class, right, where a teacher is teaching, this would not have been suddenly changed into blue. Are you getting my point? So by changing light, also you can change meaning. Okay, meaning is arrived at in cinema not simply by words. right? Meaning is arrived at cinema by lighting, by what light you use, what camera angle are you using, what music you are using, what is the makeup and costume, what are the props which are being used. All of these together actually creates meaning in cinema. And this is where the language of cinema is different from any other language. Okay, I will. Yes, we can go on to the question answer session, and your questions can be varied. It not necessarily need from what I just discussed. It can be about film studies in general. It can be about your career, anything. Yes.
I request all of you girls kindly come up with questions if you have any. Anybody has any question? Any kind of thing that you're thinking about, because let me just tell Dr. Ipsita that they all are going to be making a final product for themselves. I mean, in a group or at times an individual also. So if you are actually, and today they're going to submit also by 5 o'clock their ideas. If there is something that you're thinking you need some idea from her, please ask, please come up with your queries if you have any. Huh? Somebody wants to ask something?
Yes, ma'am, I want to ask something.
Yes,
Yeah,
Tulika.
please, Tulika, go
Ma'am,
ahead.
like ma'am said, we are preparing a final video, a short story for practical. So, according to you, what is the best way to approach the audiences? I mean, like we have studied the how to appeal the audiences. So we have studied ethos, logos, and pathos that whether emotionally or you should show your credibility or you should be logical in terms of your content. So, according to you, what is the right way or what is the right appropriate appeal to to deal with your audience or to address your audience?
I'm not understood. Yeah, there's a lot of echo. Maybe you can mute the audio. Yes. Okay. I Yeah, thank you, Tulika. I'm not sure I clearly understood your question. What do you mean by making that appeal to the audience? But if I just pick up that term, that making the appeal to audience, how can you make that appeal by actually using all the elements which I was speaking about, right? So what happens? It's a tendency among amateur filmmakers is to give a lot of emphasis to the verbal element in cinema, right? Because we are coming from a background where we are used to reading things, right? Where we read short stories, we read novels. So there's a tendency I've seen, at least in amateur filmmakers like you and me, I might myself also consider that we have a tendency to incline towards using too much of words, right? But the idea should never be to use too much of words. In fact, when I teach script writing, I tell my students that make three drafts. And the only change you should make in each draft is to pen through all the dialogues, right? Keep cutting dialogues, and instead see that instead of that dialogue, if you can use any other element and say the same. So, for example, there's a husband and wife, right? And you want to and you want to show that they're a husband and wife and they're a loving husband and wife. You don't need to always make the husband say, "Oh, I love you, my dear," right? You don't need that verbal only. Instead, why don't you just simply use a picture, right? Which maybe they are holidaying something. So then that need for, "Oh, my lovely dear wife," is eliminated. You cut that, and instead of that, you use a piece of decor and you say the same thing, because this is what cinema. The more and more words you use, it moves further away from cinema. I hope I answered you, dear.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Should
Shruti has asked.
yeah, should know your views.
Yeah. So, your views on the OTT platform and the new media. Yeah, OTT platform is going to change cinema in the sense that digitization has already changed. In fact, my PhD research is more on the lines of how now the new convergent platforms, where cinema is now available, how it has changed the narrative of cinema. But definitely, it's a new medium, and I think rather than just saying something of a very vague something, I would rather like to say that actually right now scholars are thinking about this. It's a very new platform, right? At least it's not, if not very new, it has come in a very big way very recently. So now a lot of film studies scholars are thinking on these terms, that how, if you're talking particularly about the language of cinema, then how these platforms are going to change the language per se. Right now, it will be wrong to say that the OTT has come and suddenly changed the language, because even today, the films you are seeing. So, for example, today I was watching Gunjan Saxena. It was a film which was made for a theater. Yeah, it was not something which was made for OTT. So if some scholar is now claiming that it has changed the landscape, I don't think so. It's correct. So the time will tell. Rather, I was watching one particular web show, which was not meant, and I read a little bit into back history of it. It was not meant for theater release at all. I think the name was Nashruddin Shah. Sorry, ye was there. Nawazuddin's. Uh, I'm so sorry. Anybody has seen the recent film, which is I think on Z platform, um, Hum Shakkal na something. Yeah, so there are very few content right now which is completely made for digital, right? All the big scale things you are watching is now was made for theatrical release, and suddenly since there's no option, they're releasing it on OTT. But definitely with time, content will now be start being made particularly for OTT platforms, and then we'll have to see how the content is kind of changing. At least the Indian content, yes. How do we wrap a subtle social message in a short video? Yeah. So actually, that's the most difficult kind of filmmaking. Advertisement is the most difficult film you make. Feature film is the easiest, because feature film you have 3 hours or 2.5 hours to put across your message. When you're doing it in 1 minute, it's extremely challenging. And if you want my suggestion, I will say please keep a note of the first frame you're using. Forget about the video. The first frame, that is where you're going to entice your audience with. So keep that in mind, that your first frame which you used in your film should be something very, very different, right? And if you do that, then I think you can glue your audience once, and if you glue your audience in that first frame, they will remain there for that 1 minute, right? They might not remain for a 2.5 hour film, because then you need to, but they'll remain more or less for 1.5 minutes. Yes. Brainstorming tips that we should take care while we are making a short film. I think the narrative. I don't know whether you're making a fiction or a non-fiction piece, so you need to tell that to me. But if you ask me, I feel the narrative is very important. The structuring of the narrative is an important. So it's obviously about the technique. It's obviously about whether you're using a good camera, whether you're using it. But but in today's date, especially when mobile filmmaking has come, you can make a film in your cell phone. You can exhibit a film on YouTube. So you don't need too much of gadgets. And believe me, learning these technical equipments is the easiest thing in the world. And thanks to YouTube videos, kar lo duniya mutti mein, everything is in your hands, right? So rather than emphasizing too much on which camera to buy, which is the audio, best audio, I think you should rather start. It's time you focus on the content. What is your content? What is your story idea? What is the structure in which you're putting across that story idea? uh, what are all the points we should keep in mind while making a muted audio, so that its impact will be effective in nature? Okay, this is an interesting question. So, what you mean to say that if it's a silent film, then you don't have audio, right? Then again, it becomes more challenging, right? Then again, the same thing. You have to use all the elements of mise en scène to say what you want, what you have to say. So, if you're making a silent film, I don't know if you have intertitles. So, intertitle is same as dialogues. Intertitle is where you have the title cards in between. So if that is, then there's no difference. But what will be more challenging if you can make it completely silent and do away with the audio and then say everything. So making a silent film is more challenging, I must say. And if you receive the task, you receive the challenging task. But yes, it's a good beginning. Yes. Yes. Anyone else? Yes. Lakshmi, can you suggest some software? Yeah. For editing videos, I always suggest if you need an open source software, which is completely freely available, you can use, I'm typing the name, you can use a particular software which I use. It's called OpenShot. So it's free of cost, which is it's easy to download. It does not need too much of as in it will work more or less good if you have an 8 GB RAM, and it has many of the features, at least 80% of the features which are there in say a Premiere Pro. So Premiere Pro is a Premiere Pro, this is the name. Premiere Pro is a software, if you've heard of it, it's a Windows based which is used for the professional shooting. So, if an OpenShot is a freely available version of the same. Premiere Pro you have to buy. So, but OpenShot more or less is almost 80% same as Premiere Pro. Also, what I'm going to do is I just had a few days back a lecture with the Heritage College in Kolkata, which was teaching OpenShot. So I'm going to put it in my Facebook, in my YouTube channel, so you can access it from there in order to learn Premiere Pro. Sorry, in order to learn OpenShot. Apart from that, there are a lot of YouTube videos which you can follow. So it's not very complicated. It's easy. Yes.
Any more questions that you have in your mind, girls? I think they all are actually thinking about what they are supposed to do. So everything that they're coming up with is actually in relation to that only. And
I
anyone,
hope this was helpful because this was rather on the theoretical. Uh,
yeah, but I think the idea of mise en scène is coming out so beautifully in
yes.
the past 1.5 hours. I mean, I'm sure that must have helped them. I mean,
Yes,
thinking
yes,
and visually thinking are two different ball games altogether,
absolutely.
and
And
that is
actually, mise-en-scène is also a part of the practical concept as well. I mean,
yes,
you have to
absolutely.
understand
Yes.
mise-en-scène to practically implement the same.
Yes. I think the idea for this today's thing was giving them a historical background and taking it into the
Yes.
contemporary, and it has been done so beautifully.
Thank
She has
you.
just said it. The theory builds the practical. She said that. So,
Um,
I mean, with that, I mean, is Sarita ma'am there? Sarita ma'am?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you, Ipsita.
Professor
It
Sam.
was lovely listening to you. And for a person like us who enjoy cinema, but the whole process, and I'm sure our students are enriched today. And
Thank
we
you.
hope that when we reach the next milestone, and if you are available, we will use this lockdown period to connect with you again,
Sure, sure.
and the kind of questions and the response which is coming from the students, we are very sure they've really enjoyed it. And Shweta will remain connected with you because you teach this, and it is a little more challenging for Shweta that our students have a wider canvas to paint, in the terms that there is a lot of focus on development theory and practice and
Mhm.
other things, and video becomes a part of saying that
Mhm.
development story in a different format. So our students do not take so many courses in filmmaking or cinema or art appreciation, for that
Mhm.
matter, but it's a compact kind of a thing, whatever can be brought to the students in this kind of a situation. I think today's class was wonderful, and we hope we connect again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your words.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
in continuation to what ma'am has been saying, Ipsita, we don't do any specialization in videos and films. It's a part of our because our primary focus is actually on development communication.
Yeah.
So it's like one of the skills that we actually build in order to take communication to the level of social change in the community. So whatever we
Absolutely.
think, we think with the dynamics of development. So we are
Mm.
so driven with that concept. Even so, that is the reason that's at times I'm sure in the past 1.5 hours they may be lost also somewhere because of the kind of technicalities. It must be absolutely new for few of them. Somebody who doesn't
I understand.
cinema. So I mean that's not their fault. Maybe because of the fact that we
Right.
come from a different background.
No, no,
You know,
I understand it
so, but
completely.
otherwise, I think it has been a wonderful experience in the past 1.5 hours. I mean, I think it's almost 2 hours now. And I mean, something which I actually wanted has beautifully come out. I don't know how much they have actually taken in, but I have definitely seeped in a lot. And I'm
Mm.
extremely glad that you were able to take out your time and join us. And thank you so much for giving us a beautiful narration with respect to the history, to the contemporary, and we will love to get you back, as ma'am said very rightly.
Sure.
Okay.
It was a privilege, Professor Shweta.
Thank you
It
so
was a
much.
privilege
Thank you so much.
question.
Thank you
And
so
also, I'll be happy to help in syllabi or any other help you need. So I'll be happy to help.
Sure,
For
sure,
sure.
sure. As they're about to reach, yeah, I mean, as ma'am said, I mean, ma'am, you want to add?
I just want to say that Ipsita, Shweta will run past you the kind of curriculum we have been following for the past few
Sure.
times, and now we have come into what do we call it, a new framework, LOCF, Learning
Mm.
Outcomes Based Curriculum Framework,
Mm.
and this is the first batch which is going through. And in
Okay.
case we wish to make any changes, whatever is possible in this semester, because of kind of unique situation we
Mm.
are in, but otherwise, in this semester, with what kind of a courses students come with and what is possible, so that they
Mm.
learn, and we don't become that ambitious that it becomes
Mm.
challenging for students too, but definitely it remains interesting. And those
Mm.
students who wish to pursue it in a different direction, or to even
Can.
take their dissertation topics in such a manner that
Mm.
because dissertation is an individual student's task, and if a
Mm.
particular student really feels that she's really good at it, and Shweta
Mm.
gets to supervise one or two students every batch, so maybe she can use that
Sure.
platform also. So
Sure.
Shweta, is that okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I
Yeah.
think it's a very good idea because at times we do need certain tools which will help us even in our research and dissertation. So, I mean, and we're doing advertising and social marketing also as a subject. Etc. I'll share with you our curriculum, as
Sure.
ma'am has rightly said.
Sure.
I'll surely do that. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now we'll
Thank
like
you.
allow you to leave the meeting. And thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for joining
Thank
us.
you, Professor Sarita. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Shweta. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank
We
you.
are
Thank
honored.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye. Bye. Girls, you can remain with us. Ma'am, shall we give them instructions? I have actually dropped the message on the classroom, the new classroom,
Okay.
and we have actually slotted a time also 5:10.
Hmm.
And anybody else wants to say something with respect to the lecture just we had, and also the kind of assignment that we have given you, something which has been running for the past 8 days? Anybody has any doubt in your mind? I have written it very clearly. Go to your classroom. It's already been done. There is a note for the entire class which asks each group to submit 3 topics along with the abstract. Abstract is like a paragraph. So think very hard. I mean, after I think over the past 2 hours, I think one thing has become very clear. What you write is very different from what you depict. So think hard of what you write. Don't write things which are going to be very difficult to depict. So, with that, we expect you all the groups to submit 3 topics. That basically means 3 abstract or maybe synopsis, 500 words each. And kindly mention your group name very clearly at the top. You want to type it out, type it out. You want to write with your hand, click an image and submit in the classroom, that also can be done, which is fine with us. Anybody wants to say something? Yeah, ma'am.
Ask for the preparedness. I mean, how prepared do they feel that they can submit these three proposals to you right now? I'm sure for last 1 week they have been spending some time, and it cannot be such a smooth ride that they're so quiet. So when the class is so quiet, it means there's something wrong. So please, girls, share your
Come
doubts.
on, ma'am. Just tell the truth now.
Ma'am, is it possible if we can submit it tomorrow? Like not 5 today?
Ma'am.
See, there is a question from Shruti and there is a question from Medha. Medha, your question is about time. So you are clear that three topics. I am not sure, but maybe Shweta already knows the groups you people are working in, twos or threes, whatever.
We've got
Uh,
only information of eight. I mean, eight answers we got, ma'am, when you asked them to give a diet and their groups.
Okay,
Last time.
so
Yeah.
we have to have that division of all the 21 into groups. Either there are
Hmm.
7 groups or there are
Kindly
8 groups.
put the new groups on the new classroom. Don't
Yeah.
now. I'm going to dismantle that old classroom today.
Then there are questions that how long should the abstract be for the this film. I'm not the right person. Shweta ma'am can tell you that what are those key things which should be there, and if that is you are able to say that in your 350 words or 500 words, I think you can take a call. But let Shweta ma'am decide. I will not decide on that. And the other is the three topics, and please give them in the priority order, so that what is your option number 1, 2, and 3, and of course, I mean, what is your priority number 3 could be Shweta ma'am's suggestion as priority number 1. But the idea is that mentally you should be able to uh, suggest to us that this is why you want that to be your choice number 1. And time again, if we have to respond to you on this work and all that, and if it is taken till tomorrow, I don't think that should be a big problem. But again, for this class, decisions will remain with Shweta ma'am, because she knows when is she busy, when does she wants to set an outermost limit that in between people can keep submitting, but the last minute will be this. So Shweta, over to you.
I mean, if you wanted Medha, I mean, today we have put it till 5:10. Whomsoever can submit, kindly submit. I mean, that's what I'll say. By tomorrow, I think tomorrow by 5:10, not more than that. I mean, 24 hours is enough. I mean, we've already asked you all to do it since last week. Ma'am had also put in an extra message on the classroom. We all have to get going. I mean, unless until you start writing what is there in your mind, it will never come out. We can keep on putting it behind again and again. I agree with Tanya what she's saying. She's saying, "Jab time limit hoga, to you'll be doing it," and it happens. So take it on your stride. I mean, go have lunch, take a half an hour break, you know, and just do it. I mean, if you want to do it tomorrow, that's fine, ma'am. We can just give them tomorrow at 5:10 till 5:10. I'll increase the limit for
Sure.
submission till tomorrow 5:10, but try and do it by respect that deadline. I mean, that's the only thing we'll request you all. I mean, you're mature females, kindly respect that. And Shruti, I mean, it depends whether you're working individually or you're working in group of 2, or whether you're working in group of 3. You have to submit it group wise. It's no individual. If you're working individually, then that's a different ball game. Okay. And number 3, Bhavna, 500 words is 500 words. You write an abstract for around 250 words. I mean, unless until you start writing, you will never be able to understand what is there in your mind with respect to the issue. Just keep writing. 500 words is nothing. It's just hardly a half page of your Microsoft Word. Right. I mean, 500 words for each issue. I mean, if you have picked up something like COVID-19 and gender budget, I mean, something like that, write it up. I mean, write it up for 500 words. Whatever it is, we're not going to correct the grammatical errors out of it. The idea of you writing and we seeing is that how clear you are in your mind about the issue. We want to see the clarity. That's the only thing. So it's going to be like 1500 word write up that you're supposed to give it to us. And you have to submit it in the classroom. I hope I'm clear.
Ma'am,
Yes,
one thing that
ma'am.
I want to confirm is, so I
Mhm.
meant since the three of us are working together,
So one.
so yeah, that's right.
One. Yeah.
Because the other two, unka फिर missing दिखाएगा ना
No, no, no,
classroom
no.
में that. Okay.
I think Ridhi is not there today. Ridhi was there, but I don't know. I can't see her now. But one
She
group
dropped out.
means one set of ideas. That's what we try and say.
Okay.
If you're working in
Yeah.
group, you have to come out with one product. You can't have individual products. So one.
No, that I get. Yeah, I'm just asking about the submission, the task of
No, 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 no.
submission.
It's a group activity. Every
So
class, whatever extra we do, but we have to always move one step ahead for our production. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just saying that I can see 21, including two of us. So
Yes,
there
ma'am.
should ideally be 23. So there are two people missing.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I think Renu has not joined today. She's unwell actually. She's not coming for other classes also, ma'am. Renu. And I don't know who else is there. Yeah, Riddhi is missing. Riddhi is missing and Renu is missing.
Okay, so your attendance is taken for today. You
Yes,
may
ma'am.
make it a record.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do it. Any other doubt that you have, girls? If you have, you can ask. It's
Ma'am, I write it. What are the points we should keep in mind while writing the abstract? Like,
I mean, any and everything that you think about the issue you would like to project, you would like to visually analyze it. And
okay,
it completely depends on your thought process, Lakshmi. I mean, what exactly you think about an issue and how you would like to present it. Think in a story form, I will say. That's the most easiest way to think.
okay,
Think in a story form.
sure, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other doubt that you have? Medha, you want to say something?
No, ma'am, nothing. It's just that we had all of us has individual ideas, and three of us are there. So we needed time to streamline them and just come to a conclusion which we
You
want.
guys only decided that you want to work in groups.
Yes, ma'am. So
You have
that's for that.
then you will have to align yourself. That was something that you have to think about it.
Yes, ma'am. We're on it. We'll submit
And
it by today.
if you think you are very secure and very mature enough to, in a group also, if you want to submit it individually, we are giving you that option also.
Okay,
But
ma'am.
then it's like you're going to be in a group of three, going to come up with 9 ideas. Then you pick the best out of it. That can also work. I mean, it depends completely. We give you a lot of freedom. The idea is just to think. I mean, put your, thinking process on. That's the only thing we want. Because it will never be made in 1 week. You have to understand that. If we are started from the first week, that basically means the process. And you have to take it very seriously. Otherwise, it will come out very shoddy. I hope that's clear.
Okay, ma'am.
है ना? So let's respect the deadline for tomorrow. I'm going to change the deadline in the classroom also. 5:10 tomorrow, that is Tuesday, and that is 18th of August. I hope that's clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So, ma'am, can we call it a day?
Yes.
Yes.
Shweta, thank you, and thank you, girls. As ma'am said, you people are mature. We don't want to be running after you. You know the challenges. Everybody has some or the other stress because of COVID in near or far family relationships, and there are other things we are doing. There are exams and classes going on. So please take that mature step, work in group. I think it is the time that you learn this team spirit and team building, because in life not much can be achieved working individually. So it is a very good point to learn to work in teams, and these situations and platforms give you that learning opportunity of working in teams.
Absolutely. So please take care and thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining in. We'll meet again next week. Bye. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am.